your week?
Oh, it's fun.
Right now, I'm in such a phase that every time I'm coding, I feel stupid.
It'll pass.
No, I literally coded the wrong thing.
Allie said what? 10, 12 years?
10, 12 days, maybe.
No, I knew what I was doing, and still did the wrong thing. It was like... You know what I'm talking about. The getting still the post.
Yeah, you're speaking the wrong verb.
Yeah, I was wondering why it's not working. I don't know any message.
I sent you a message.
You sent it to the wrong person.
No, it went to you.
Oh, now it's gone. And you sent me, I sent you a message.
But there's a message before that one.
Oh, now I remember.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let's do a quick recap of all the various things we learned last week, and let's take our sights toward where we're going. I think Richmond class had a very good recommendation. They said, you know, when you post code, it'd be really helpful if the developers actually comment and add verbose comments about this is what this line is doing, this is what this line is doing. It'll help you later on as you go back through it and understand what's going on. So we're going to try to do that. As a matter of fact, it looks like Harper, like just this morning, 8:16 p.m., so last night, looks like he did that, and he's checked in something else to GitHub. And Kelly, pretending to be a student, asked, how do I put my own code on GitHub?
So my own GitHub. Like we all have our own. Yeah.
Your own GitHub? Okay, let's go through that. So, everybody, Richmond, you getting me?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah? Okay, so Richmond's good. So, let's go through. We've got a lot to cover today, and the good news is most of it is review. All this stuff, you actually know how to do the basics. We're just going to cover the specifics. So, oh, by the way, y'all know how this works. You see I click that, and it kind of shows or hides things. How did I do that? It's a click event. So it's a click event on what element in the page do you think I did that on?
Script, and so it'd be a click, and then you can toggle it.
I used a script tag, and well, we don't have to guess. We could actually right-click and choose View Source. But yeah, you could cheat. Oh, Richmond's reminded me that I actually used my computer over the weekend and I didn't set my display settings back. There we go. Grandma style.
I can see it now.
So, what are we doing here? We've got, that's a click event. So when I click that, what language did I use probably to make that behavior happen? jQuery or JavaScript. And because I'm lazy, I probably use jQuery because I don't use straight JavaScript much anymore. So let's think this through. So the requirement was when I click each line, it shows whatever's underneath it. What CSS property can use to be show or hide things?
Visible, invisible?
Visible or invisible, but visible invisible would actually do what? It would leave the space there. So you have a big blank space, and that's not really what we want. We want to have it completely gone. What's the other one? That's correct, but in this case, not.
Is it toggle?
Display, I can change the display setting and change it between block or none. So none is the way it is here. When I click on that, all I have to do is find the related element that I want to show or hide and change its display property. It's that simple, and it looks like magic. So let's just show you I'm not lying to you. Where's the code?
Doesn't show the script.
Well, I was expecting to open the page and I could just look at the JavaScript. Where did it all go?
It hides the script, so you can see.
It's in its own page. Where is that page? It's right there. So you just click that. There it is. Actually, it is done with non-jQuery. It's old school style. There we go. But that's all it is. You know this stuff. That's what this week or the next couple days is all about. It's at this point, I feel like we've got toddlers, and it's like I can't talk English with you just yet and have all the fun things and talk to you about the theory of the universe yet, because I still need to give you some English words. But you're almost there. After this morning, I'm going to be able to open it up, and we're going to start talking about how do you talk with the real world? How are we going to talk with APIs? And let's take a look at the agenda. This morning, you're going to write queries write code in jQuery to be able to vote on using APIs. These are real-world APIs, all of these. So you're going to vote on what you want to look at tomorrow. We don't even have the agenda set. You're going to vote this morning. We're going to go off and it's like, okay, it's just jQuery, just JavaScript, talk to any of these APIs. We'll have a little exercise tomorrow on how to do that. But the content is not set. We'll do that tomorrow. So the focus this morning is we're going to do some review for a few minutes, like I promised. And then we're going to go review some of the very important bits that we taught you last week, the stuff that you're going to use almost every day as a developer. And as part of that, your exercise is going to be to write your own code to vote. We'll get into that later, one step at a time. And then this afternoon is all Bootstrap. Bootstrap is, remember David's methodology of Google and cheating, and you're going to get ahead? Bootstrap is something that has taken the development world by storm as of like 5, 6, 7 years ago, because the Twitter developers got together and said, you know, we've got a team of designers, expert designers, and by the way, designers, that job role in technology means what they do all day is CSS and HTML to make things look pretty on every possible formatted device. So you already know how to do that, kind of. The thing that you're probably lacking or thing you need to meld with your own personality is your creativity. Because designers, people are hired as a designer because of their ability to make things really pop, make a user interface special. And usually that has to do with a little bit of graphics design and more user experience. And all of that is not technical. I'm teaching the technology. I can't teach you about how to make things look good because I don't know how to do it myself. So I've taught you the technology. If you want to be a designer, if you have that tilt, if that's the way you're born and you have that great personality, Harper's going to be very interested in you because I'm going to give away one of his secrets. For the past, since we started the company, he said he's been looking for a unicorn. And what he means by that is somebody who has design capability. Sorry, Harper, I'm giving away a secret here. Design capability and can code. Because we've always thought about, sometimes our stuff works great, but it just doesn't look as good as it works. And we either have to go hire a designer or get a contract designer to come in and help us, or an external firm, and that's really expensive and it hurts our project budget. Or how great would it be if we had a developer that could do design work? And we just like, you're not actually coding the other stuff, you're just doing design work on this project. So if you have that skill, polish it, and we're definitely going to talk with you. At least Harper is. So that's his unicorn, somebody who can do coding and design work. David, I think, had a question.
Yeah, is there a particular reason on that .click event that you didn't use the jQuery show and hide?
None at all, except that, let's take a look. I don't have jQuery in here. If I had jQuery, I would have done it like that.
Okay.
What David asked is there a reason I didn't use the jQuery show or hide? And it's because I didn't go through the trouble of including jQuery because it's a very simple click event. But in jQuery, how might you do what I just did in this file here? There's a method, and we're going to start using the proper names for it. A method is a function attached to an object. We're going to go over this in a minute anyway. And jQuery has two very, very commonly used ones. Instead of setting the CSS property to block or none, you can also say show or hide, and it does exactly what it sounds like. No parameters, just this thing that I found, show it, or this thing that I found, hide it. That's all. So yes, we could have done it that way too. Once again, you see there are many different paths to success in coding. That's part of the creativity. Okay, so let's start with review. On the first day, and this was, I was being way too ambitious. I was thinking, you know, how cool would it be if I could show them 6 different languages on the first day? And I'm glad I didn't do that, because on day 2 we'd have like 10 people left in the class. But I can do that now. And why am I doing this? Not to hurt your brain on a Monday morning. It's to show you how much you already know. I don't expect you to understand every line of code here, but I'm going to open it and I'm going to point out, you're going to be able to read this thing. You're going to surprise yourself. So let's start with our comfortable security blank. Maybe not so comfortable with everybody. This is JavaScript. And by the way, if you wanted to get this, and we're going to get back to, let me remind myself, Kelly's very pertinent question of how do we make I'm going to get back to that. So, how do we pull down the latest information in this repository, course content? Because that's where I added these. And as a matter of fact, you're lucky. The only reason I didn't go through this is because I didn't put in instructions on how to run the code. So I actually did that over the weekend. And I say, okay, this is how you run it, because we haven't actually covered any of these languages. But this was a good check. I wanted to do it on day 1 to see if you had everything installed. Because if it doesn't run, and I'm sure the docents now are thinking, I'm glad you didn't do that either, because on day 1, instead of helping you with the code, they would have been running around trying to help with your installations. So at this point, you don't have to follow along. Just sit back and relax. And by the way, for the first stuff this morning, all the code I'm going to write, we're going to write it together. I'm going to share it. So you don't have to copy it. You just need to understand it. And then you can go back and look at it later if you want to. So the way you open a solution file is you just double-click on it, or I would just clicked on it and pressed Enter. And it's going to open up Visual Studio. And this is why I don't often use Visual Studio unless I have to. It takes like 10, 15 seconds. This is a pretty fast computer, too. So finally it comes up. And do you know how in your editors now where you have the little files on the left-hand side? I could move this over here, but in Visual Studio it's called the Solution Explorer. And I'm not going to cover really what's going on here. The point is I wanted to show you the code. This is all the code that's in there. Okay? And I've commented here, it says, wow, look, a comment in C# is identical. Identical. No change whatsoever from JavaScript. So as we go through this is what I want to impart. What you know from JavaScript and what hurt your brain last week, it was worth it because the things that you learned are completely transferable to all these other languages. It's not like they start from scratch every time. They steal from each other. So this little function, it's a function because it has squiggly braces. You know, you've seen that before. What do you think that's doing on line 14? Well, it's unfair to ask you really, so I'm going to just walk you through it. This looks kind of like in JavaScript where I say var. That's declaring a variable called result. And actually, I could actually say var in C#. It's that powerful. It can figure it out. Add to. What that is, that add to sounds like something we would have written. And sure enough, this is a function. You've learned functions. This looks a little bit strange because we haven't talked about C# and what it's doing, but Derek's going to come in and do that. This is the name of the function. It has 2 what? What are these called? Parameters. It has 2 parameters. We're passing 2 and 4 as parameters, as n1 and n2 as the parameters. And return. You've seen that. You know, it just means I'm done with the function. Send this back. That is the entire function body right there. So, line by line, the way you read source code, top down, it's going to say, I'm going to declare a variable called result. By the way, this is called an integer variable. Remember, there are numbers, different flavors of variables. In C#, you just get to say what flavor you want. That's all it is. In JavaScript, you can't do that. This says, call the function named add2, passing 2 and 4. Uh-oh, what's that?
Console log.
It's kind of like console log. It says show result, but this happens to be another function. You see how we break things down into functions? That function's right here. So what happens here? We say, okay, we're calling this function, we're passing as a parameter whatever is in that box. Remember, variables are nothing more than boxes where you stashed a value in it. So we say, okay, oh, by the way, here's a parameter definition, but in C# you can specify the type, the flavor of variable. That's all the difference is. That's the name. This is the function definition right there. This is exactly console log in C#. They even use the same word. We just pass it one parameter, whatever we want to write to the log. When it's done, this means don't return anything. That's all that means. It sounds like a scary word, void. That just means I've got nothing to send back. So we're done with that. Then it says console read key, true. Here is where you're going to fall in love with C#. IntelliSense. It'll tell you what it wants, and it even explains it in English. How easy is that? It tells you the type of parameter. Now, I'm not going to get into C#, but I just wanted to show you. You can read this stuff. So how do you run this? Click the Start button. And it's going to compile it, which is something that is different from interpreted languages. It's actually going to make, it's going to take your source code and it's going to rearrange it into computer instructions. So it'll be super fast when you actually run it later on. So there, the end result is 6. Okay? Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on any of these because the whole point of this exercise, and you have all this code, you can go back and look at it, is that you're going to be able to look and see this stuff and read it. Okay? JavaScript, bread and butter. So, we start here. Does this run immediately? No. And that's a big point I want to get across today. If you define a function, it doesn't run immediately. If you never call that function, it sits there forever and does absolutely nothing. What about here?
No.
Doesn't run, no, because we haven't called it yet. This, that's a comment. This is the first statement in the file that runs because we're declaring a variable outside of the function and we're calling a function. We're doing exactly the same thing. Notice the difference in similarities between JavaScript and C#. Here, we don't have to specify the flavor variable. JavaScript says, I'll figure it out. Don't bother. You don't have to specify what type you're sending back or if you're sending anything back. Just don't worry about it. Just run it. Return, exactly the same thing. Come back here. What do we do with return? We put it into a variable value called result. Show result. Notice I've changed the style of coding too. That's one thing you'll see. Between different languages, the developers in that language, remember, developers in different languages don't often talk to each other. It's a holy war. So it's like if you're a JavaScript node developer and you're a C# developer, you might fight if you see each other in the street. It's not that bad, but they don't talk each other's languages. And just to keep it a little bit different, the JavaScript developers like to do camel case in their stuff, and C# developers don't do camel case. It's like, oh, you must be a Java or JavaScript developer. So you see, you're reading between the lines here. But just naturally, when you're writing that language, it's good to kind of blend in. You don't want to be caught in a dark alley somewhere. So that's JavaScript. Don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Let's do it in Python. By the way, here's how you run Python. Python space, name of your Python file. All this is in your Git repo. So I know Richmond is probably freaking out because I'm going really fast, but it's because we have a lot to cover and you have all this code. And you don't have to remember it. You don't have to type it. The point of this exercise is what? So you know you can read the code. I had a client that he used to want to sit behind me when I would open up and look at the code. And he's like, wow, it's like reading the Matrix. It's like, no. It's not that cool, but it's nice that you can do that. You can read the Matrix now. So here's Python. Look how pretty and simple that is. What can you see here? I'm not going to go through line by line because it does exactly the same thing. What do you see that Python does that may be a good or a bad thing? Now these are functions. So those are functions, a def, but notice there's no opening and closing. It doesn't do the squiggly braces. How does it know what's part of the function? Here is where, I keep telling you, format your code. In Python, you have to format your code because this white space tells that it's inside the function. Now, if you format your code improperly, it doesn't even run in Python. Okay? So get into the good practices, and then you can start talking these other languages. Yeah. So, that is completely different from that. So Python's a little bit different. We're not going to cover Python as a language, but you know how to read JavaScript. Function, function, function. That's the first thing that runs. It works exactly the same way. It says jump into the function, run that, do that, come here, print. Oh, that's how you say console log in Python. It's all there. They just have little quirks in how they like to do things. So let's take a look at, I'm going to leave Elixir for the last. VB script. And Harper's like, why are you showing them VB script? That's from like 1990. Just to show you differences in how different languages like to think about things. Function. In VB script, they name the function different if you return something or if you don't. They call it a subroutine if you don't return anything. Almost all other languages on Earth call it the same thing. It's a function. While VB and VB script like to call it a subroutine if you don't return anything back. And that's all we're doing here is we're saying message box, and I'm going to show you what this one does in a minute. By the way, I told you on like day one, this is one of the favorite languages for virus writers and hackers. Why? Because all they have to do is get an unsuspecting user to double click. Instead of showing 6 there, I could have done anything I want to your computer. So here, this is the first line. Oh, what's that? It's a comment. They like to do their comments with an apostrophe. Kind of weird, but that's VB script. And Kathy, I feel your glare. Because she and I used to do VB6. So this is second nature. So how do you, that is var. Dim in VB and VB script means declare a variable. Calling a function, passing two things, or getting it back into a variable that we just declared here. Now, notice this is how they like to write things. They don't do camel case in VB script. If you do that, they're going to identify you as a JavaScript developer and you'll be ostracized. It'll work, but you don't want to do it in VB realm. So here, they like to capitalize every word. Okay? So this is not just 1 or 2 languages. We're going through 6 languages. And I'm showing you, it's all the same stuff. So Ruby, you could have run a Ruby script. I decided to show you a little bit of a class. This is a little bit slightly more complex. But class is just a container. Forget about that for now. What's that called? Function. It's a function. 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 Oh, P. Ruby likes to be cute. P is short for puts, which means console.log. Just write it on the console. That's how they write a comment. This is the first thing that runs. And I'm calling the function named run right there.
What's a variable look like?
A variable in Ruby, you don't declare them. They're inferred. Ruby likes to be cute. So that is how you declare and set a variable value. Remember, Ruby built for developer happiness. I guess having to declare your variables is contrary to developer happiness. So whenever you mention a new thing, it says, OK, you got a new variable. OK, so now I think we got one more Elixir. This one is a little bit different, but you can still read it. So this one you would have to open it and you'd say run. And it's like, OK, that's where it starts. This one, it's even less code than Ruby. Now, do and end is how you say squiggly brace and squiggly brace in Elixir. It's all the same stuff, it's just how they say it. Def means that's my function. So and I could write it like this. It's not like Python where the spaces matter. This says call that function passing a 2 and a 4. Right here it is. N1 and N2. Oh, what's it doing there? In Elixir, they took it one step further. It's like, I'm tired of writing the return keyword. So the last statement in my function automatically gets sent back. So you just get used to that. And in Ruby, you do the same thing. You don't say return most of the time. The last thing that runs in a function is the return value. So this is the crazy thing about Elixir that Harper's like, don't. This is actually why I love Elixir, though. You take the result here, and this feeds the result into the next function. So this says add 2. So 2 and 4, what's 2 plus 4? It's going to take 6 and feed that as a parameter to show result. So it's going to jump down here. How do you say console log? io.puts. And then it's done. That's all. So that is 6 languages in about 5 minutes. And
what was the
question?
Sorry, the def p?
Def is how you define. So the question was, what is the difference between def and def p? Def means there's a function. Def p in Elixir means private function. That just means we haven't discussed scope. We're going to in a few minutes. It means where can I see this function from? Which code can call this function? Because as you get into larger and larger projects, it's nice to encapsulate, and I'm using some developer words here, to hide some code from other developers. Like we use the Spotify or Twitter API. I don't want to be confused by the internals of their black box. I just want to see the functions that they want me to use.
Right.
When you say private, and you saw that in the Ruby, it was very quick. It means don't show other developers this stuff because this is like my internal code.
That's your own little black box, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Private is like, this is only for me. It's not for other developers to use.
So what is the point of the different languages?
So the question is, from Bethany, what's the point of having all these different languages? That's a good question. I think it's more a holy war. It's more like, it comes back to which technology vendors built the languages. For instance, if you're going to go to work in a Microsoft shop, that means they have Windows servers and they do a lot of Office and they do some macros and their users are used to the Microsoft Windows ecosystem. You're going to be using Visual Basic or C# or another .NET platform language. So those languages were built by Microsoft. And you would need to use those languages because that's what their products talk to. If you're using Outlook, if you want to send email automatically with a script in Outlook, you're going to write it in .NET because guess what? They're not going to support Ruby. So you have to learn that language. If you're going to go to work with a startup company and they want to deploy to Linux servers, you're probably going to choose Ruby or Elixir or something that runs very well on Linux. So it's more about choosing the right tool for the job. Okay.
Why is there Apple and Microsoft?
Yeah, Apple. What's Apple's language? Anybody know? They got a couple. Objective-C, which is similar to C#, not really, and Swift, which wherever Mudit is, he's been writing Swift. Okay, let's see if we have questions. Okay, Brendan says different languages are used as different tools. You don't use a hammer to screw in a screw. So it just, whatever the job requires, you got to use that language. For instance, could I use C# in the browser to move a div around? No, I have to use JavaScript. Because why? The browser doesn't speak C#. Okay. This is just a reminder for myself. What we're giving you, in the first week I know was a whirlwind. It was, you're just hanging on, you're feeling like Dorothy in Kansas, like hang on to a post because I just need to stay here for next week. Congratulations on coming back this week because everything we taught you, and Harper actually said, a couple people told him that, everything we're teaching you is the core of what developers do every day. In a lot of courses and a lot of, especially in academia, they'll teach you the whole spectrum, everything. We cut out all of that. We're teaching you only this is exactly what you do every day. So even though last week was really action-packed, everything we covered is something that you need to remember or try to. And to that point, that's why we threw out a day today. It's like, we're going to go back and do JavaScript and jQuery again. We're going to make sure you get it like the back of your hand, or at least have a chance to do that. Because we've omitted all of the other stuff. Everything we're covering is the 20% of all development stuff that you do 80% of the time. How are we doing that and nobody else does? Because we do this for a living. And we don't care about hurting your brain. If you're paying me, I might be concerned that you'd leave. I'm more concerned that at the end of this course, I can put you to work. So I'm teaching you the valuable stuff here. And you don't have to get it all, but we are covering everything that's important. Nothing we're covering is fluff. So pick up the keys. At the end of this course, we're going to help you try to be introduced to employers other than ourselves as well. But I feel like I'm giving you the keys to a Ferrari. If you don't get these keys and get in that driver's seat, it's all on you to drive it. If you let them fall on the ground, that's all on you. We're here to answer questions. We're going fast. It's a Ferrari. I'm not giving you a Pinto. Okay.
Do these young people here know what a Pinto is?
I don't know. I don't know if people know what a Pinto is. They probably don't. Look it up on the internet. You'll laugh.
Google it.
Google it.
You'll die laughing.
Okay. Let's do some coding. HTML elements in review. You know, to make this fun, I was trying to think of, let's do something timely. Let's do something so that get engaged. Let's write some code.
1970. Piece of junk.
How do we start to write code? Before we even go there, let me get back to Kelly's question. How do we create our own repository? And just for fun, I'm going to go and create one. So everyone, I know some of the people in Richmond, I saw some of your repos, by the way, over the weekend in Richmond. You all have some really interesting stuff going on. Really impressive. And shame on me for not teaching you how to do this earlier. But Harper actually, during some of the breaks, apparently has been telling him how to use Git properly. Let's go and I'll show you. Over here, sign into your GitHub account. And let's go ahead and do this together. And you're going to have probably just one thing here. So one organization, which will probably be your own name. By the way, for those of you interested in Node and Mongo, there's a new repo that has the entire source code and instructions on how to create a Node Mongo site for day 13. We're going to actually use the public API for that today. But I had to prepare that in anticipation. So all you do is you click New Repository. And I'm going to name it Day 6. And no, do it under your own name. And the value there is that once you're done, if you go to a job interview, especially these days, one of the things in the interview, if you're going for a developer job, is going to say, oh, what's your GitHub URL? And they want you to have published code out there that they can go look at, which is kind of invasive. But so they won't actually see your code. So you can name your repository whatever you like as long as it's unique within your account. And what we're going to do is you can make it public or private. Public means anybody can see it. Okay? Now, this is where GitHub starts putting their hand out. It's like, okay, it's going to cost that much for us because it's Empower. So you can make it public or private. I think you might have a, will it say you have to pay for a single private?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If you have a .edu account, like a student account, you get 2 years free private.
What?
So for now, just make it public. We can delete the repo in a minute, no problem. I just want to show you how to do this. So you click that, create repository. Done. It's that easy. Now, how do we actually get things going? You know all the commands to do this. So I've created a brand new repository. You can do HTTPS or SSH. I'm going to copy this. Now, let's remember back to like day 1 or day 2. I'm going to jump back over here. Now I'm going to try to go slow because this is something you do every few weeks, not every day. But when you create a new project, you usually create a new repository to go with it. So you need to know how to do this. So I'm going to go to Empower. Go to the directory above where you want to put this. So that's the thing to remember. It got me the first couple times I was using Git. I would create a directory, and then I would go there and I would clone. But when you clone, it wants to create the directory. So go to the directory above where you want it. So in this case, I'm going to put it in Empower. Right-click, choose Git Bash here. Okay? Clone. Git clone, and now I copied that from over there. That's actually why they have this little button, so you can copy it because they know that's the next thing you're going to want to do with it. And I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to press Enter.
So, I'm sorry, the directory above where we want to go, then it's projects, not Empower.
No, you go to the directory above which. So the question was, shouldn't we have gone to projects? And the answer is no, because projects on my system, it's got a directory for each client that we're doing business with right now. So Empower is like a client to me. So I'm creating a project within Empower. So if we look at that, what's the command to list the directories on the command line? ls. It's like there it said, okay, there's a day 6. Notice it said, you appear to have cloned an empty repository. Yeah, we did. Don't worry about it, Git. We're good. So if we go back over here, what happened? It created a brand new day 6, and that's the magic. Remember that hidden folder? It put that little hidden folder in there, and it knows. It's initialized its Git database. So anything we do, we're ready to do all the other Git commands. So I'm going back over here. We can leave this alone for now. Now we've created a place for us to do some play. I'm going to go to my text editor, and I'm going to go File, Open Folder. And I'm going to go and open that day 6. So I'm just going to choose it, and notice down here the button says Select Folder. Because we're going to open the whole folder, and now there's not going to be anything in it, but it's going to give me a context in my text editor for my project. Everybody with me, or should I slow down?
Slow down.
Slow down a little bit? Okay. So let's, while people are catching up, let's walk through what I just did. So we went to GitHub. We said, create a new repository. We gave it a name, and then we said, oh, what's the URL of that? And we copied it. We went to our own system. We went to the Empower folder, whatever root folder you want to have your repository underneath, and we right-clicked, and we chose Git Bash here, and it gives you the black window. Then we used the clone command, git space clone space, and then we pasted that URL. And what that did, when we executed that command, it created a subdirectory named after our repository. So it's like a blank slate. You're all ready to go now. Anything we do in that directory, we can add, commit, push. So for the end of all time, we're done with setting it up. It's a one-time thing for a project.
I have a question for you. So if we are on the public, we have a public repository, can we still have private aspects of a website? So say we have script that we have written that we want to be private, that we don't want all developers to see. Can we write it private in there and it's still private, or is it?
It's a very pertinent question, and I'm glad you brought it up, because the question is, this is from Scott, if we're on a public repo and I write this, this bit of code that allows me to make millions of dollars from the Las Vegas gambling houses, I don't want to share that with everybody. It's not exactly how you put it, but and I've got this script that is intellectual property of mine. I don't want to share it with the world, but I want to share most of it, just so they know to contact me to pay me for the rest of it. How do you do that? There is a special file that you can put in the root of your directory, and I did it yesterday. It's .gitignore, and .gitignore says, let's open this up. It's just a text file. it will say each line identifies a path, like a subdirectory, or a file that should be ignored whenever I push, no matter what. So it's like these are hidden. So you can still use a Git repository that's public, but anything you put in your .gitignore file is automatically excluded. So that's how you do that. So if you had a file or in a subdirectory named money-making scripts, script.js, you could exclude it specifically like that. Just add it there and save the file.
So you have to create the .gitignore file, or does it like automatically?
By default, nothing is excluded, but if you, let's see, example, and it depends usually on the languages. Usually what people use gitignore for is, in C#, I told you that you compile, you take your source code and you make binaries, which is like DLLs and executables. Well, the DLLs and executables, nobody can even read those. So it's kind of a waste to take these megabytes of information and put it in the cloud and pull it back down all the time. So people often do a gitignore for those when you're doing a C# type of project. So it depends on the style of project of the language you're writing. Example gitignore files. If you search for that, yeah, some common gitignore configurations. There are lots of different ones depending on, usually it's like a little bit of ignore patterns, okay. So here are some suggestions on things that you could do and put inside of your gitignore. But if you just search on the internet for example.gitignore, you'll get lots of them. As a matter of fact, you'll even get .gitignore files they'll just give you because it's developer sharing with the developer. So by default, everything goes. So getting back to our repository, we've got no files. Now, we're going to write a little bit of code today. Let's get back to the agenda. So I wanted to cover some of the HTML elements. Okay? So in order to do this, let's have a theme that we're going to talk about. Now, I had planned on doing a little FIFA World Cup standings table that looks cool. And we can just, it's static for now, but we just like, let's create a little page, and in the process, we'll use some of these HTML elements. So if somebody else has a better idea, by all means, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so let's go over to our editor. We've got no files. I'm going to create a new file. And this is going to be just a simple HTML file. Somebody, machine gun style, rattle off, what's the structure of an HTML page so we can get to the good stuff?
HTML title, body, script goes in there somewhere, and then close all those.
So HTML head, title, body, and then close them all. Somebody help me out a little bit more specifically.
Close them all in reverse.
Backslash thing what it is.
Backslash, yeah.
Actually, if you have the page already set up, I noticed if you start to type HTML and then hit tab, it brings it down for you in Sublime.
It does? Yeah. So Michael pointed out that if you save it as .html and it knows that it's HTML, Sublime will help you if you do tab. So that's another way to do it. Really, this is not the interesting part. So I'm going to save it. Once again, I'm going to save this with you. You're going to have access to this repository, no problem. So don't worry about trying to keep up and type all this stuff. The point is to understand the concepts. You can go back and look at the code a little bit later. There's nothing special about the name of the file. So I've given it a title. Where does the title show up? Why do we do that?
Shows up on the tab on the website.
Shows up on the tab on the website, like right there. So that's where it shows up. Okay, so we've got a body. Now, let's create a, I want to make the whole background black because we are talking about sports here. It can't be just normal white and black text. So how do we change the background? Let's do some CSS. Very good idea, Jamila. So where do we put our CSS? How do we say that? We could. Let me show you. Let's get more into the real world style of doing things. Harper and I spoke, and he said, you know, in the real world, we often create a separate file for our CSS. So we'll just do that. So let's go and create a new file. And we'll name it. Well, we might as well type some stuff in here. How do you make the background of the whole page black? It's background color. And black is the absence of color, so it's just zeros. Now, is that going to do it, or we have to tell it what to relate to, right? Body. And how do we say, is it just like indentation, Python style, or is it what? How do we do that? Curly braces. Y'all know the syntax. I see some faces like, come on, we know that.
Well, my thing is, where did you get the index.html?
I just saved it.
Oh, you saved that as index?
Yep, I saved the first HTML file as index.html. And I'm going to save this one as styles.css. Now, really, we should put it in the subdirectory, but we're not going to do that right now. You know, in a larger website, you create little styles and you create little scripts. You have little subfolders, subdirectories, and you can put your files in there, but we're going to be as nasty as we want to be right now. So, going back over here, I'm on the HTML file, and we've got a CSS file. They don't talk to each other right now. They don't know anything about each other. How do we tell the HTML file about the CSS file? Yep, there's a tag called link. And I think they've got this crazy attribute. What is it? Rel is equal to style sheet. I always have to look this one up. Tell me if I get this right or not. I think it's href, or is it src? I think it's href.
It's href.
Okay, href, and then you say styles.css. Now, if we did have it in a CSS subdirectory, it would look like that. That's the only difference. But since it's in the same folder, we can just say, oh, that's the name of it. And the ending here is weird too, isn't it? Is it like that, or do you not end it?
I don't think you end it.
You had it right. Backslash. And then
You don't end it.
Just like that? Okay. Is there anything else? Do I need to say type, or no, is that good? I'm really asking how, I'm not being facetious. Usually I copy and paste this.
Harper says type equals text/CSS.
Thank you, Harper. He's like, how do you not know that, Allie? Okay, so I save that. We've got nothing going except a title, and we've got a black body. So how do we run this? I want to see, how are we doing? Let's go over here to Windows Explorer, and let's double click. The CSS, or HTML, or what? HTML. So that looks pretty bad, but that's success, because we haven't done anything yet. Yeah, we've got the title up here, and we've got a black background. So let's go over here. We're back on the HTML file. Let's create a table. So we're going to have, let me draw this out real quick. So we're going to have something that looks kind of like this, and you all tell me how to do this. The point of this is to review a little bit, but it's mostly to show you some of the other things that we have not covered. So we're going to have a table that kind of looks like that, and we're going to have table rows, and this is going to be really ugly, but you're going to get the idea. Table rows all the way down. And there's like a, say we're interested in the differences between EU and the Americas. So we're going to have like Americas, EU, and if you want, you could have Asia or something over there too. So then we're going to have, there's a point to my madness here. This is better specs than you'll get from half the users on your projects. Okay? It's like, go make me something that looks like that. It's like, what? You kind of understand what they're talking about, but we're going to have the teams. So let's say Brazil. I have no idea even who's in the World Cup. But now we're not going to actually have the real standings, but I'm showing you because we're focused on the technology. But the idea is 1, 2. Really, it would be nice to have the matches, like Brazil versus the Netherlands, and see the results. The point here is actually to show you the HTML tags that we've kind of glossed over. So how do we create that thing? All we've got over here is this HTML file, and we need to translate that user spec into something that looks like that. Somebody help me out. A table. Let's create a table. Just like that, or do I need to do anything else? Close it. Whenever you open something, close it. And what else do y'all think? Let's make it, let's give it a header. Okay. And we need to have a row in the header. TR. Table row is always TR. Now inside of a table header row, you can either say cell, which is what? TD. Or there's a special header cell, which is what? TH. So we're in a header, we might as well use TH. Now the question is, jumping over here, how many cells do we want in our header? 2. But the rest of the table has 4. That's going to be an interesting problem in a minute. So let's do let's write what we need here. So Americas and EU. And that, is there anything else we need in our header? No. So in the first row, we're actually talking about our data. So the next section we should probably identify as T-body. So let's do that. And in our T-body, we need to have a row. So let's TR again. And here, the way to think about this is I've got a body, I've got a row. Where are we in our logic? We've done that. Now we are right here. Okay? Left to right. So I'm saying we're going to have 4 cells here. Brazil, 1, Netherlands, blank. So we need 4 cells. How do you say cell? And we got 4 of them, so. Okay. And it's Brazil, 1, Netherlands, blank. Okay. I know I'm jumping around, Richmond, but it's really, I'm just writing the text that I've got here in the image. So, Brazil, 1, Netherlands, blank. Okay? Now, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to refresh our page, and
Probably because it's naturally black.
Oh, yeah.
Text is black. So you can see.
text is black. So watch this. Select. It's there. It just, you can't see it because we're humans. Okay. So how do we fix that?
On the CSS.
Let's go to our CSS file. How do we tell it so we can see it?
Just color.
Yep, you could say that. Color white. Save that. I'm going to go back over to my browser and refresh it, and we can see what we did now. That's pretty ugly. And look at Americas. We can even see. Let's give us some borders so we can actually see where the table borders are, so we can see what's going on. How do we say that?
Border color.
We could. just like margin and padding, there are multiple ways to say this. There are 3 separate properties that you can set, primary properties for borders. One is the color, one is the style, and one is the width. So
We don't want to add it to the body though, because we could be adding border to the body. We want to create a new element
okay.
in our CSS.
So Melissa's speaking up and saying, you're about to do something wrong, Allie, again. You're about to add a border to the body. You're absolutely right. What would that have done? We would have had a very slim border all the way around if we could see it at all, and we would have been confused. So instead of body, let's go back and look and see. We want to talk about just that one table, because later on we're going to have other tables down below that we don't want to style in the same way. So how do we tell it just that one table? We should probably give it something so we can find it. Give it an identifier. Exactly. Now you're thinking about a front-end developer. So we can give it, are we going to have one or more than one? That's the question I always ask myself about using an ID or a class. We're going to have one. So if we're going to have one, what are we going to do? Give it an ID. Okay, so I'm going to name it standings. Now we've got what we need. We're going to go back over to our CSS file. How do we say, I want to style the standings table to be bordered?
Table, space standing.
Hash. If I said that, what would that mean? Well, that would mean find any table whatsoever, and inside of that table, find any IDs of standings. It's completely different from that. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have an assessment that we're going to give you to take home and 50 questions on it. Like 5 or 10 of them are about this, because this is extremely important. Understanding CSS selectors, because you use them not only in CSS like this, but also in jQuery. So it's very important you understand how these things work. Now, if I wanted to have more than one table, and let's do that, because that's one of the concepts that we need to cover. Believe it or not, we're actually covering the content. All of this stuff, we're going through it, but we're just doing it more fun than one line at a time. So I'm going to create another table, not because we need it to show the results, but because let me scroll down. Just to show you that we can style things a little bit differently. I'm going to do something very similar here, just to show you the context. Don't worry about trying to keep up here. The whole point is that that ID is different from standings up above. And you're going to have all this code, so you can relax, no need to sweat. You don't have to keep up with my typing, because that's not why we're here. We're here to understand the concepts. Oh, I used a TD in a T head. Is that all right? Yeah, it's fine. You don't have to use a TH. HTML will forgive you. Okay. So that's going to be a very simple table, the point of which is that I want to be able to style winners different from standings, maybe. So I'm going to go over here in my CSS. So I've got 2 tables. Both have an ID, standings, winners. If I wanted to say style them both the same for some things, comma. A comma means this and that in CSS. So for the moment, whatever we type in here is going to relate to both of those tables. So how do we say border? There are a couple different ways. The shorthand is this. Border, you say what style you want. And I don't think it matters the order, does it? I think it's smart enough to figure out which order. Now, we can't make it black, because then we're not going to see it, because we have black background. So
Yellow.
Let's make it yellow, yeah. Save that. Okay, so we've got two tables, and it's often when you're building a table and you can't see the borders, it's hard to tell how to fix it if it doesn't look the way you want. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to refresh, and good, kind of. We've got the outside of the border of the tables showing up yellow, but we don't see the real things going on inside the table. How do we tell it we want to see the borders on the individual cells?
So you go back and you could add in, if you want to do it on both of them, you add it in on table standings, TD, comma TD.
Okay, so remember that the concepts here, you find what it is you want, and then if you're talking about something inside of that, space. So inside of table standings, we're looking for any tags of type TD.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
And because the comma, we're saying this and that.
Is one of them TH though? Is there one standings TH?
The question was, shouldn't we be doing TH? That's why sometimes we use TH, so we can style it differently. So maybe we just want to talk about the TDs here.
Okay.
If we wanted to talk about the THs, absolutely. We would have to do this. TH is another thing. We might as well do that. Notice how the comma can be, you can have as many things in there as you want. You're just adding to the list. Save that. Let's go back over here. There we go. That's all our ugliness right there on the screen. Let's start and make this a little prettier. Number one is, the original spec said this. We wanted Americas and EU, and it took up 2 columns each, and the rest of them have individual columns. In HTML, anybody know how to do that? We haven't covered it. Call span. So Sasha has probably seen this before, or she's done a lot of homework. So call span allows you to say, you know this guy? How many columns do I want it to span? By default, it's 1, but we want to span 2. So call span is equal to 2. We want to do the same thing for EU. Do we want to do that same thing down here? For Brazil, 1, Netherlands, and so on? No. Those are fine just like they are. The default is just 1 column span. But you can override it. But with, what's this thing called? What's call span? The technical term? It's an attribute, just an HTML attribute. I'm going to save that. It's still going to be ugly, but at least it'll be lined up now. Okay. Let me teach you a little bit about tables. You can specify the width of the entire table, and we could do it individually on standings, and let's do this. Style equals width colon 500 pixels.
Can't you do that by percentage as well, like 100%?
The question was, and this is from Brian, couldn't you do that with other units, with like percentage? And the answer is absolutely. And if you check back over here to our agenda, right there we are. Pixels, percentage, EM. I was going to actually go look that up. I know what EM is and how you use it. I think it's the height of the standard font. Harper or somebody else, tell me what EM, 1 EM stands for. Somebody go look that up. In the meantime, we'll get back there in a minute. So the call span, we're going to say width of 500, but I want to show you the precedence of CSS. So we've got CSS up here. What happens if over here, I want to talk about the whole table, not the internals of a table, but how do I talk about the whole table, both of them?
Table, space,
Exactly. So if I want to say all tables in my whole application, no matter what their IDs are, I could say it like that. And I want to give them, let's say, give them a width of 800 pixels. Or no, let's do 90%. 90% of the container, which in this case is the screen. There's no functions in CSS.
That's like creating a class, though, for the entire, anything that's a table. I mean,
It's an element.
No, it's not an HTML class.
It's an element, yeah. Yeah, don't confuse classes with, I know what you're trying to say. So that Brian was saying, isn't that like a class of the whole thing? It's like, no. When you say table or body, you're talking directly about styling an HTML element. Element is the right
I
word.
got it, okay.
Question.
Is there a keyboard shortcut to switch between tabs?
Control tab. So the question was, is there a keyboard shortcut to switch between tabs within your editor?
So much better.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
The answer is Control tab if you want to do that. So here we got width 90%. Now this is going to be a little bit of a conflict. So we've got table width of 90%. Over here we said style width of 500 pixels. And down here on the other table, we didn't say anything. Who knows what's going to happen when we refresh this page over here?
You'll freak out.
It's not going to freak out. It's going to be all right. Which table is going to be styled which way? What takes precedence is really my question.
The last one. So it would be the one with the style on the table.
So Scott says the last one wins, and that's correct. It's, in this case, the style tag will override whatever you saw in the file. So we said all tables, we want you to be like 90%. But we overrode that 90% specifically on the first table by saying 800 pixels. So there you go. They both got the first style, and then this one got an extra style that overrode the first one. Anybody need clarification at this point? Okay, standard font size. So I guessed right. So exactly the way Harper said it. 2EM is 200%. So let's make it so that the winners, the text of the winners table are actually huge. So it's like 300%. How do we say that using EM? So we've used percentage. We've used pixels. You can also use centimeters. You can use, I think there's inches, but nobody ever does that. But you can. So if you see some weird stuff in CSS, they're just units. Let's make the text of the second table to be 3 times its normal size. Font size is the property, but how do we talk about the second table? As a matter of fact, I just want the header cells in the second table. And the second table, by the way, is named winners. So I want the headers in the second table to be 300%. Space here means what? Inside. So it's like inside the context of my table with an ID of winners. How do we talk only about the header cells?
TH.
TH. That's why we do our TH.
We use TD for that.
Did we?
He changed it back to TH.
Yeah, you did. You don't have it.
Scott's saying, didn't you use TDs there? Let's go see. You're right. I did TDs. So I'm going to throw you another curveball, though.
You have to change those then back again.
You're right. Scott is right that I didn't use THs, so I can't use. So that's why why you might want to use THs. But I actually want to style them differently anyway. So here's the wrong way. If somebody didn't know about TH and they wanted to say, well, I really want just those in my header row, I'm going to give it a class of header-row. Look at what that class is assigned to, a TR. How do I talk about that from anywhere else? Speak in CSS, tr.header-row. So it's the row with a class of header row. And we're going to talk about the TDs inside of that. Question?
Do you necessarily have to put table hashtag the name of the table, or do you just put hashtag the name of the table rather than having both of them together?
So Sasha's like, why are you being verbose? Why are you saying table hashtag ID? We don't have to. As a matter of fact, that is going to work just fine. Hashtag winners, but I'll show you where it might bite you. So let's do that in a second. So I'm going to leave that off. We don't have to say table hash. By the way, what does table hash mean?
All the table.
Yeah, it's just being more specific. It's saying not just any ID of winners, but only tables that have an ID of winners. So, is that going to work? I want just the header row to have font size of 300%. Help me out, guys. So, the way I talk about this is what? tr.header-row. It's inside of winners. So how do I say inside of? Space. So now I'm going to say tr.header-row. And then to style the text properly, we should actually talk about the lowest element. So in this case, it's going to be TD tags. So we're going to go one more level. So inside, inside, inside. I could say this. That means direct child. It means not just any TD that could be 3 levels below. It means the one right below me.
Does that mean it only selects one?
The question was, does that mean it only selects one? No, it means it has to be right underneath my table row that has a class of header-row here. So if I had an embedded div, and then I had another TD, which you wouldn't do in a table, it wouldn't find it. The TD has to be the next level down. That's all that means. You don't often see that except looking at professional designer CSS because they care about, I want this one or 3 levels down. Developers don't usually get that specific. So what do we want to do to begin with? Somebody said it earlier, is font size. By the way, who can tell me what the colon's doing here? Yeah, that's how you say equals in CSS. So just saying set whatever over here to equal to that. So font size, we're going to say 300%. How do you say that in EM units? 3EM. Not that I want you to use one way versus the other. You're going to have to see this in other people's code all over the place. So I'm getting used to see different things. Save that, go over here, and refresh. It's huge. Okay? So,
Good on the top.
what's that?
That would look good on the top.
Yeah, yeah. We should probably do it to the top one too. Melissa has some design sense. Like, you know, I really like how your page looks. Not. But let's change that top one to be the same. You know, I want to do that to both of them. Let's do it to the other one.
All you have to do is delete the hashtag winners.
She thinks that if we just do that, it's going to fix it and we're going to be able to, we'll apply it to both. And people are shaking their head, no, they don't agree with you, Melissa. Somebody who doesn't agree with her, what's wrong with that?
So you've added the class to it, and so the other table doesn't have the class header row, and so it only calls that.
So Scott says, well, you had a class header row here, which is how we find it down here. But up here, we're talking about Americas and EU. There's no class, so it's not going to find it. That's one reason.
Oh, we have TH as well in our Americas and EU.
Yeah, we have TH there. It's not a TD. So, yeah, that would have been nice if we actually had a certain standard way of doing things, but we didn't. So let's just do a comma because we want the same character. Good. Scott?
Could we just leave it and create a class and then make that like a global class? So whenever you do want the font size to be 200 or 300%, you can just add that in.
So now we're thinking ahead. So Scott says, you know, rather than write this long, nasty CSS to select exactly that element in big structures, wouldn't it be better just to create a class and then assign that class wherever you want it applied? And the answer is absolutely. So I'm going to leave this, but just for legacy reasons. Say we come in 2 years after we originally wrote this and we don't want to break anything, but it was like, back then I didn't know about how to do this properly, so let's do it like this. very large font. So, comma means, oh, do it to this selected elements or this one. So it's both of them get the same style. That's all the comma means. So I'm going to say very hyphen large hyphen font. And there's a right and a wrong way to do this. We could go right here on the TH and say class is equal to that. And I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to go down here, do the same thing here, and here. And that is, I'm going to save that. So what did I do? I took that class, and I ran around and I applied it to exactly every element that I wanted it to apply to. Nothing wrong, too bad. You know, it's still going to work. Let's go over here and see if it works. Not quite. I probably didn't save my CSS. Hold on. There we go. I hadn't saved the file, which is why it didn't show up. So that works. Why is that not preferable to something else? What could we do to dry up the code? Don't repeat yourself.
Why not put it in the row instead of in the cells?
Now you're talking. So Melissa said, you know, rather than put it in 4 different places, or really tables often have like 10 different columns, rather than have to put it in 20 columns, what if we put it on the row? And with the slightly more complex CSS, we can say the same thing. By the way, what's happening on line 25? What's going on there?
You have 2 classes.
I've got 2 classes on the same element. No problem with that. Just put a space in between, and it'll figure it out. So, how do we say, what's that?
That's all, just a space, not a comma.
Nope. So the question is, do you have to put commas? Like, no, if you put a comma in there, it means it would try to interpret that whole thing as the name of the class. You need to have a space. So, we've got very large font on the TR tags, and we've got TH or TD. So, very large font on the TR tags, and inside of there, how do we say inside of?
Space.
Space. And it's got to be TH or TD. Okay? So this looks messy.
You left out a T on the last.
Thanks. Okay. So I've got a bunch of stuff going on here. This is the old way. Now we're saying any row in our whole table, find the TD tag. Any row in our whole table, find the TH tag. If you have the class of very large font. So could we apply this to body, like rows in our body, rather than just the head? Sure, why not? All we have to do is put that class on the TR. So I'm going to save this, and let's go over there and refresh it. Does the same thing. Why is this better than the other way? When you're a front-end developer, you have to start thinking about how much text, how much code am I sending across the wire? Because in a page like this, it doesn't matter at all. But before you know it, you're going to have pages that are enormous. So anything you can do to reduce the amount of text, stuff you send across the wire, think about the guy that's on a cruise in the middle of the ocean, and he has to get to your site to do his work, and he's using dial-up speeds through a satellite. You don't want him cursing you. That's the guy I think of when I'm trying to make my pages super fast and small. So it may not seem like a lot to have written it once or twice rather than 10, 20 times, but it's also easier to look at as developers. If I have to look and understand less, it's better. Simplicity is beauty.
Do comments bog down the readability? So, you know, if you commented a variety of things throughout a very long page, so you get documentation of what's going on, etc., does it just automatically skip as soon as it sees that comment? And I'm just curious.
So the question is comments. There are things called minifiers, where if you're really concerned about, you know, for Amazon and the other big sites, they will often take their code that's done, that is commented well, and then they'll run it through a program that reads their code, and it takes all the comments out, and it smushes it together to get rid of all the extra space. So you should always write comments. If you're thinking like a developer and you're trying to find a good excuse to not write comments, that's not a good one.
I like comments, sorry.
So comments in HTML, it's usually not an issue because front-end developers often don't write comments. It's like, just read the text. In back-end languages, when I'm saying stuff that runs on the server, if it's compiled, those comments are extracted out. They're not part of the runnable code anyway, so it doesn't matter. So you should always write comments if you have something you want to say. Okay, let's get back to the agenda and see what we've covered and see what we hadn't. I know what I want to do. So we're talking about the World Cup, and we've created an enormously ugly page. Let's give it some spacing. Let's make these two tables the same size. Let's give it some spacing. How do we do that? Help me out here, guys. I'm going to change the background of the first one to be white because let's make it dark gray but not black so it offsets from the background.
That'd be the headers. There's CSS.
So we can talk about the TH tag. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to talk about the table standings is our first one. And we're going to say TH. Actually, I just want the whole table. Table standings, let's do all the non-header rows. TD. Oh, by the way, you don't have to use T-head or T-body, but if you do, you can use that. You can start using it as another level to say, I want just the body rows, not the header rows, which is why you do it. Background, color. That didn't help too much. So you see that's ever so lightly not so black. So let's make it, I'm really not a designer. Y'all are picking up on that. Help me out, guys. What's a good color? So blue. Not very pretty, but,
Soccer-like, though.
it is soccer-like, yeah.
We could make it the color of the teams.
Powder blue. Yeah. Make it light blue.
Scott had a suggestion. We could make the background color of the cells the same as the color of the teams. Let's do that a different way. Let's make it so that there's the Brazilian flag right next to Brazil. How do we do it? How do we put the flag there next to Brazil?
IMG.
There we go. Images.
I want to take
Where did I put all my stuff?
Couldn't you just do it blank?
Oh, I know it. It's filtered, so all my stuff's there. It's this. This is Brazil. It's really bad form to put images in your root, so I'm going to create a subdirectory. Just so we put, okay, these aren't code things, these are just images. I'm going to call it brazil.png. Okay? So let's put the Brazil flag right there. How do we do that?
Image source.
So we either do
IMG.
IMG,
SRC.
SRC. What?
It's going to be whatever your image file is.
Good. Now, one caveat here. It's often a good idea, let's see how crazy big that is, to specify how big it's going to be. Yeah, that makes it really unreadable. So we want to change it so that we don't change our image so it kind of fits our UI. I'm actually teaching you valuable skills as we go through this because this is what you do on a normal day-to-day basis. We don't want it that big, but we don't want it warped either. We don't want to skew the image. So we don't want to specify both width and height. If you specify one, it will automatically resize the other to be proportional. So let's change the width to be something like 25 pixels. Okay. Not very readable now, but at least it's there, you know? Wouldn't it be nice when you click on that, it would take you to a page about Brazil's soccer team. So HTML, now we've got an image. Images that's not the same thing as a link, is it?
Outside the image tag.
Very good. I don't know how you all figured that one out, because I was planning on making sure you understood it, but at least 2 or 3 people said, oh, all you have to do is put the image inside of an anchor, ahref, and that's exactly right. So you can mix and match these elements. Ahref is equal to, and let's go find a page on the Brazilian soccer club. Football. National. Okay. It looks like they're already... There we go. That's good enough. Copy link address. So I've got an anchor tag. Good. So now I'm going to save that. So I've got an anchor, href. Inside I've got my image. And then I've got close the anchor. So let's go back and see what that did. It's clickable. Now, oftentimes, if you look really close, it's got a slight little blue border because it knows it's an anchor. Nobody likes to see that blue border. How do we take that blue border away? For the image. Yeah, well, any anchor, it likes to have the little underline by default for a link, and it's going to do that around your image, 1995 style. So let's get rid of that, and how do we say that?
Outline none.
That might be one way.
Do it in a style, so
Yeah, I would do it.
anything with an A, border is not.
We can say we want all images inside of an anchor. How do we say that? Say A, colon. Brandon back there is going to try to use a pseudo class. And you could, but I was getting more directly at, let's talk about the image inside of the anchor. Space, inside of. And what's the thing we're looking inside of? What are we looking for?
IMG.
IMG. How do we say no link underlining?
Text decoration, none.
Text decoration, none. It's like, don't give me the underline, don't give me the overline, just give it to me like it is. And you're not going to be able to see it, but there's a slight blue border around that. And, well, the background's blue too, so you really can't see it. But now if I click that, the whole page is going to go there. Okay? That's usually not what you want if you want to keep people's attention on your page. How do we say open up another window?
Target.
What if you just had it in a pop-up?
Yeah, what we want to do is have
On
a
that page.
pop-up or send them to another window. That's exactly what we're going to do. And that, who knows how to do that?
Is it target?
Target.
Target equals.
How do you say new window?
Underscore.
Underscore blank. Okay, so that's a valuable HTML attribute. That says, when they click on me, I want you to open up a blank window and fill it with this. Don't navigate away from here. So now if we go back and refresh, and I click that, it's going to open up a brand new window. When they close it, they go right back. Okay, so let's take a look at an assessment of how far we got through this stuff. Radio checkbox. I don't have time to go through that stuff with you right now, but I want you to understand what a radio button is. Radio button is the little circles where you can click on one, you can make a selection among multiple entries. Checkbox, you've seen checkboxes. How do you say checkbox? Input type is equal to checkbox. Nothing to it, I just haven't showed it to you, so I wanted to expose it to you. Call span, we just talked about that. Form, we have to come back to. I'm going to take a little note over here. We talked about an image, a clickable image. And let's do this. These are the things that we need to come back to. Parent-child, how do we say, okay, I haven't talked about parent-child. Top in within, the top is called a parent. Within, it's children. That's the way they think of it. So TD is always going to be a child of a TR. That's the terminology. So TR underneath, inside of, children of TD, or what's another thing that you could have inside of a TR?
TH.
TH. If you're in a header and you want to throw a TH, you can put a TH. Question?
How does the hierarchy for this go? So would you be accurate in saying that a TD is a child of a table, or is it only one up is the parent? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a very pertinent question, and it's the answer. The question is this: how far does CSS and jQuery look for the hierarchy? It looks anywhere inside of it. So if you have a table and you want to say, I want to find the TD in the table and skip over all the other layers, absolutely you can do that. You can do that no problem. One space, it'll do it. If you want to say direct, like TR, and you have to have a direct child, that's what the little greater than thing is for, that nobody ever uses. Because it's so easy to just say space, like I don't care if it's direct, just anywhere inside of it.
So the parent-child was just the terminology for it.
Yeah, parent-child. Selected for more than one class. How do we say we want the same style applied to more than one?
Space between the two classes?
Oh, if you want to apply more than one class to an element, it's class space class. But in CSS, when you want to talk about, when you want to say, I want to make, actually, I need to get back to this anyway. Remember the winners that Sasha said, why don't we just get rid of that specificity right here? Well, what happens if I do this? I'm going to jump over to the index, and I'm going to have a button at the bottom. And I will have forgotten, especially in a larger page, what's been written. So I'm going to say input type is equal to button, ID is winners. Value is equal to click to see the winners. Save that. Now, this isn't going to hurt us right now because I'm saying inside of winners, you have to find that. And of course, inside a button, you're not going to find anything. But if we had some additional styling, like this, so, and that's fine. The reason it's called cascading is because you can layer on multiple styles additively. So let's go over here, refresh. Look what happened to my button. Because we weren't specific, if you wanted to do that, that's fine. That's kind of what Melissa was getting at earlier. It's that if you want to remove the specificity, it applies to potentially more things. If we look at, I think Chrome is going to bark at us because we used the same ID. No, it used to. It used to say you have the same ID on more than one element in the page, and it doesn't like that. But notice how this is styled the same as our table. How did we do that? We just weren't very specific. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back.
I was just about to mention.